Mass exodus. Tens of thousands of white South Africans seek refuge in the U.S. amid Trump's controversial policy shift. In a significant and contentious development, the United States Embassy in South Africa has confirmed receipt of a list containing 67,042 names of individuals expressing interest in relocating to the U.S. as refugees under a new policy directive from President Donald Trump. This surge in interest follows an executive order issued by President Trump on February 7, which prioritizes refugee status for Afrikaners, a white minority group in South Africa, citing concerns over racial discrimination and land expropriation policies. Executive order details. President Trump's executive order specifically addresses the plight of Afrikaners, descendants of Dutch and French settlers, alleging that they face unjust racial discrimination and are victims of disproportionate violence related to land ownership disputes. The order mandates that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem prioritize humanitarian relief efforts for these individuals, facilitating their resettlement in the United States under the Refugee program. Demographic context. South Africa's total population stands at approximately 62 million, with Afrikaners comprising about 2.7 million of that number. The executive order marks a notable deviation from President Trump's broader policy stance, which has generally aimed to curtail the U.S. refugee resettlement program. Response from South African authorities. The South African government has refuted President Trump's allegations, stating that claims of targeted land seizures and discrimination against Afrikaners are unfounded and largely driven by misinformation. Officials emphasize that, despite the passage of a land expropriation law intended to address historical inequalities, no land has been confiscated under this legislation to date. Diplomatic tensions. The executive order has further strained U.S.-South Africa relations, particularly in light of South Africa's recent legal actions against Israel at the United Nations, accusing it of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The Trump administration has criticized South Africa's foreign policy stance, alleging support for groups like Hamas and Iran, and has expelled South Africa's ambassador to the U.S., citing anti-American sentiments. Public reaction and implementation status. The South African Chamber of Commerce in the U.S. has reported being inundated with inquiries from white South Africans seeking information about the refugee program. Neil Diamond, the Chamber's president, clarified that while the list of interested individuals has been compiled, it does not constitute formal applications for refugee status. He emphasized that official registration must be conducted through U.S. authorities. The U.S. Embassy in Pretoria has acknowledged receipt of the list, but is awaiting further instructions on implementing the executive order. Controversy and criticism. Critics argue that President Trump's focus on Afrikaners is politically motivated and inconsistent with his administration's previous efforts to limit refugee admissions. Supporters, however, contend that the policy brings necessary attention to a minority group facing potential discrimination. The situation remains fluid, with the actual number of Afrikaners who may be granted refugee status in the U.S. yet to be determined.